Welcome back to Movies Buff. Today I'll be going through a Nigerian drama, Mr. and Mrs. Savage. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, and press the bell icon so we'll bring you more interesting recaps like these. Mel has just been picked up from the airport. While she expresses her discomfort with the car she's been picked up in, she receives a call informing her that her mother has recently taken ill. Mel quickly makes a stop at a pharmacy to get some drugs. After getting what she needs, she steps out of the pharmacy but accidentally bumps into a stranger. She immediately signals that he must have been blind not to have seen her, and she proceeds to leave. After finding out that another car is blocking her from leaving, she scolds her driver and angrily steps back into the pharmacy. Mel meets the stranger, Bankole, to move his car out of the road, so she could leave, as she's in a hurry. Bankole tells her she lacks manners, which he blames on her upbringing and insists she calls whomever she wishes to. Their heated exchange goes on for a while before Bankole finally opts out to leave. He arrives home and meets his wife, Kim, who's quite upset about his extreme work ethic. Kim reminds him of their anniversary the following day, and he assures her that he's got everything planned out. The following day, Bankole tells Kim he would be stepping out to quickly hand over some documents to Mrs. Darling, and he wouldn't fail to be back in time. Before leaving, Kim tells him that she's pregnant, and Bankole is overjoyed and shocked that they would finally be having a child after several years. Meanwhile, Mel has just recently taken over affairs at her parents' company. She instructs the HR manager to work on restructuring the organization by relieving unnecessary manpower and elevating the more industrious ones. Just as she finishes giving out her instructions, Bankole walks in and is shocked to see Mel. He soon deduces that she must be the daughter of Mrs. Darling. Mel asks what he's doing in her office, and just before he could answer, he receives a call from a delivery man meant to bring him a package. Bankole gives the delivery man Kim's phone number, which is also copied out by Mel. Mel calls Kim that Bankole is currently in her office at the moment flirting with her. Kim replies to Mel that whoever she has with her can't be her husband. Mel describes the native dress and perfume Bankole has on for Kim, and she proceeds to give her their current location. Kim immediately picks up a car to track them down. Shortly after, Bankole receives a call that Kim has been involved in a car crash. Mel returns home and explains to her mother that her day had been offset by the same man who had caused the incident at the pharmacy, and she feels that this man had her followed on purpose. Mrs. Darling suggests that she should have given the man a chance to explain why he was following her, as she is a very attractive woman, and he might have some interest in her. Mel blows off the idea, stating that she has no interest in such types of men. Then Mrs. Darling asks how her meeting with Bankole Badmus went. Mel is clueless as to who that might be, and Mrs. Darling explains that he is the MD of Stone Bank, and they were supposed to be having a meeting earlier that day. Mel replies that she never met anyone by that name. Just then Mrs. Darling receives a call from Bankole. After she apologizes for not being able to make it to the meeting, he informs her that he just lost his wife. A quick funeral is organized for Kim at their home. Mrs. Darling after the ceremony comes in to give her condolences. Mel, who is also there, becomes shocked to see that Bankole is the same man she felt had been stalking her. Mrs. Darling does a quick introduction, and Bankole calmly greets her and compliments her. Mel, who is still startled, offers her condolences as well, and she excuses herself. Later, Bankole goes to Mel's office and explains to her that he has now taken over as the new CEO of the company. Then he forces her and her employees out of the building. Mrs. Darling tries without any success to reach Bankole on the phone. Mel arrives home and seeks answers from her mother. Mrs. Darling gives Mel a letter which she reads and finds out their company owes the bank a lot of money. Mel decides to go see Bankole. He tells her he has been expecting her. Mel tells him to let her mother be, and he should come after her instead. Bankole tells her that she's of no value to him. He warns Mel that she and her mother have got 14 days to vacate their house, hence they would be thrown into the street. Mel abuses him and is about to leave when Bankole asks for her hand in marriage.
Marry me.
That is why I said...
Mrs. Darling is furious at the idea and unwilling to let Mel get married to Bankole not long after he lost his wife, just so she could get back the company. Mel discloses that she's already pregnant. This makes Mrs. Darling very surprised. After they get married, Bankole brings Mel back to his house. He tells her he expects her to adhere to the rules of his exquisite mansion, and she would be responsible for cleaning the house and preparing his meals. Mel counters that he must be a silly joker if he thinks she's going to be doing any chores. The following morning, Mel is dressed up and prepared to leave for work, but she gets to the door to find out it's been locked. She asks Bankole for the keys, and Bankole states that now she's a Badmus wife, whom are traditionally housewives, then she must be a sit-at-home wife. Mel is stunned by his words, and he tells her to go upstairs to change into something more appropriate, or not, and get comfortable with her new role by preparing him a local delicacy, which he fancies. Later Bankole comes up to her room and asks why his meal is taking so long. Mel counters that he can't possibly think he can make her into his toy. Bankole restates that she's his property now, and he'll do with her whatever pleases him. Mel tells him that he can't take her job from her. Bankole stresses that her only job is to take care of him and that if she should fail, her mother would lose her company, and both of them would be on the streets. Bankole is in a hurry to get to a meeting the next morning but finds out that the tires of all his cars have been deflated. While Bankole freaks out, Mel comes out and teases that he might as well take a cab or hop on a motorbike, as it would make quite the headline. She walks back into the house, and Bankole rushes to take a motorbike. Later, Bankole comes back home and is unable to get in the house because the doors have been shut. An agitated Bankole orders Mel to come downstairs and open the doors. Mel tells him he could go back to his office or check into a hotel, as a day without him in the house felt like heaven. Bankole asks his security to bring him a ladder, and he's ready to climb up when Mel picks up a bucket of water and pours it on him. Bankole threatens that she'll pay for what she's done. The following day, Mel is done having her bath and opens her wardrobe to find all her stuff gone. She rushes downstairs and asks Bankole what he had done with all of her stuff. He tells her to go check the gym house at the back of the house. She goes to check and finds all of her clothes caught up in flames. She goes back to him agitated and asks him to take her life already. He tells her he thinks her fashion taste is ridiculous, and that she would fit better in Kim's clothes. He tells her he also burnt all of her foreign hair and had all her bank cards blocked, as he had noticed her habit of ordering food, and if she must eat anything then she must cook. Later the drama continues between the couple when Bankole comes to the living room, changes the TV channel to his preferred choice, and he orders Mel to find some other room with a TV to watch what she wants. They both begin throwing spiteful comments at each other, which goes on for a while before an old friend of Bankole, Helena, arrives. She introduces herself to Mel as her teacher. Helena goes to meet Mel later, and she tells Mel that her husband had her enrolled in an attitude class. Mel asks Helena why she thinks she's qualified to be her teacher, as she believes she has a way better attitude than hers, and Mel demands her educational qualification. Helena tells Mel she should be honored to have her, as she's a master's holder in psychology from a prestigious university in New Zealand. Mel tells Helena to go find out who the best graduating student was in the year 2018, from the University of California. The following day, Mel is in the kitchen trying to prepare one of the local delicacies Bankole likes, but she has very little success and decides to give up. Later Mel approaches Helena, and she asks if she drank the oranges which she squeezed and kept in the fridge. Helena ignores Mel's questions. Mel tells her she has no idea what she's still doing in her house, and it's about time she leaves. Mel tells her Bankole is her husband, and that she had better stay out of their business. Helena tells her that they live in Africa, and two is never a crowd. Later, we see Helena trying to seduce Bankole, to rekindle their old relationship before his marriage to Kim. Bankole responds that she's in his house for a single purpose, and that is to make Mel's life a living hell, and she shouldn't get distracted. Mel comes out and demands that Bankole kicks Helena out, as she's trespassing in her home. An argument soon ensues between the two ladies, resulting in Helena slapping Mel. Mel asks Bankole if he's just going to let his side piece humiliate her in such a manner. Bankole immediately withdraws and tells both ladies to sort themselves out. The next morning, Helena wakes Mel up by pouring water on her, and she instructs Mel to come downstairs and make breakfast. Shortly after, Mel receives a phone call from her mother, who seeks to know about her welfare. Mel responds that she's happy and that she's being treated right by Bankole. Mrs. Darling requests to speak with Bankole, but Mel tells her mom he's downstairs making her breakfast. Mrs. Darling wonders why they have no maids to do that. Mel responds that they both thought it wise to send away all the maids so they could be alone and bond better. Mrs. Darling tells her she can't wait till she's back at the office. Later, Bankole searches through his house for a lost item, but he finds a letter written by Kim to him. He reads through the letter, in which Kim expresses her gratitude for all he's done for her, and she wishes they both have a happy anniversary. Mel comes out and asks Bankole what is going on. Bankole, now overwhelmed with emotions, shouts at Mel that with just a single phone call, she destroyed his life. After scolding her, he steps out. Mel picks up the letter and reads it. For the first time, Mel feels guilty about what she had done. That night, Bankole returns home drunk. Mel tries to take care of him, but he shouts at her not to come close to him. While Bankole goes on lamenting over the death of Kim and blaming Mel for what his life has become, Helena comes downstairs and takes Bankole upstairs, to her bedroom. Mel is totally enraged by this. Meanwhile, Helena tries to take advantage of Bankole's unawareness and get intimate with him. Just then, Mel badges in on her and points a gun at her, asking for a reason not to blow her brains out. Mel chases Helena out of the house that night. The next morning, Bankole wakes up, and he's shocked to see Mel staring down at him with a smile. He asks why he was in Helena's room, why she was there beside him, and why he had no clothes on. Mel answers that it's not out of place to be naked in front of his wife. Bankole asks if they got intimate last night, and Mel tells him he wanted it badly, she just had to oblige. Then she tells him he was absolutely amazing, and she goes downstairs to make him breakfast. Mel is busy cleaning the house when she comes across a picture of Kim. She expresses her guilt for making the call that led Kim to an early grave and wishes she could take it all back. While she seeks forgiveness from Kim, Bankole walks in on her, he avoids being seen by her and leaves. Later he goes to Mel and asks what he perceives downstairs. Mel tells him she's trying to prepare him his favorite meal. He tells her he's not interested and she can take off the excitement she has on her face, as her plan of taking over his ex-wife's place after killing her would never happen. Mel reminds him that it was his idea they get married, to begin with. Bankole tells her she does not deserve happiness and she would never be happy. Mel seeks to know what else he wants from her, as she's only trying to fix things. Bankole asks if she's trying to fix the life she ruined by killing his ex-wife. Mel responds that he should kill her already and get it over with since he's got a gun. They go on at each other's throats spitefully for a while before Mel screams for it to stop, and she's tired and wants out. Bankole goes after her and tells her she's never leaving, as they would both die in the marriage together. They step out of the house and accidentally bump into Mrs. Darling, who just arrived. They greet her with a smile on their faces. Bankole asks Mel to take her mom's things upstairs, which she does. While having dinner, Mrs. Darling asks how they've been enjoying their marriage. Bankole tells her it's been fantastic and magical, and he goes on complimenting Mel, while she smiles back at him, playing along with his games. Although Mrs. Darling doesn't seem quite convinced. She asks about the baby they are both expecting. Mel comes up with an excuse that she had a miscarriage just 2 weeks into their marriage. Bankole steps in and suggests that they are both young, and there's no reason they wouldn't keep on trying. He promises Mrs. Darling at least 3 grandchildren. Bankole continues professing his love for Mel in front of her mother, who is heavily suspicious of their state of affairs. Mrs. Darling informs them of her plans to stay with them for some time, which they accept and promise her a wonderful reception. When she exits the dinner table, Bankole accuses Mel of setting all of this up, and he assures Mel of the worst when her mother leaves. Later that night, Mel goes to sleep in Bankole's room, knowing her mother would not believe their act earlier if they both slept in separate rooms. Bankole assures her that would not happen and tells her to find her way with resolving those issues with her mother. Mel enforces her way to the bed, and Bankole tries to drag her out of it, resulting in a brutal brawl between the couple. A loud argument ensues, and Mrs. Darling is woken up by this. While their arguments go on, Mrs. Darling walks into the room. She tells them she knew everything was wrong. She instructs her daughter to go pack her things, as they both leave immediately. Mrs. Darling assures Bankole that she would sign all necessary documents, handing over the company and estate back to him. The following day, Mrs. Darling scolds Mel for marrying a man who blames her for the death of his wife, knowing her condition. Mel assures her mom that she is okay, and the doctors confirmed it too. Mel explains that she married Bankole so they wouldn't lose everything. Mrs. Darling expresses that she means more to her than any company or estate. She advises Mel to go to Bankole and seek his forgiveness for the pain she caused him. Later, Mrs. Darling goes to Bankole. She expresses the admiration she's always had for him, considering how he took over a bank on the verge of collapse and turned it into one of the top banks in the country. She also tells him the story of how Mel developed her anger disorder. Her husband, Mel's father, had been unfaithful in their marriage. This then resulted in frequent quarrels, with several abusive and unkind words being thrown around the house, to which Mel was a constant witness. Mel was left vulnerable by this situation. Her vulnerability would eventually be taken advantage of by a servant at the house who abused her, and immediately stormed off. Mel, who from that day on grew angry and violent, was later diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder. She was sent abroad to study and attend rehab. Mrs. Darling hands back the documents to Bankole and leaves. Later, Mel also comes to seek Bankole. She pleads for his forgiveness, and Bankole thanks her and leaves. Later, Bankole invites Mel to a restaurant. He plans on going away for some time to be able to rethink and heal over his wife's death. He tells Mel it was his wish to see her before he leaves, and tells her their issues are now bygones. He hands the company and estate documents back to Mel. Mel also returns the ring to Bankole, but he tells her to hold on to it, take some time to rethink, and he would accept any action she decides on. He promises her there would be no drama this time around, and the movie ends here. You're welcome to share your thoughts on this movie in the comment section below. Subscribe to my channel for more movie recaps like this one, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay well, thanks.